In this video, we're going to go over how to give an effective lecture and have your students not be bored ever again. Now, if you're serious about energizing your classroom, pick up my free guide, 20 Ways to Energize a Classroom, and start utilizing it in your class today. In order to give an effective lesson, your students have to be interested in what it is you're going to teach. I mean, let's face it, if your students don't care about what you're saying, they're never going to be engaged. They're never going to learn what you're teaching them, and then you're not going to be an effective lecturer. So in order to do that, you need to first understand how the students' brains work and what they're interested in. Think about it. When you go on a date with someone, you don't just talk and talk and talk and talk until the person is bored to death and never wants to invite you ever to come on a date again. No, what you usually do is find questions to find out what the person is interested in. Once you find out what the person is interested in, that person then wants to listen to you a little bit more, because now you're talking about things that they're interested in, that you guys have mutual interest in, and that they're curious about, and therefore you have an engaging conversation. This is the same thing in a class. You really have to understand your students. If you don't understand your students, you're not going to have an effective lecture. That is rule number one. So how do you do this? Well, you're a professional. I mean, you're not just a teacher, you're a professional educator. And professional educators do research. You have to figure out what students like. You have to figure out what their interests are. You have to figure out where their brains are going, because when you know where their brains are going, you know where to take them with your lecture. So how do you do this? Well, the first thing is do some internet research. Find out what's trending in the world today. Find out what's trending in whatever age range you're teaching. If you're teaching middle school students, find out what's trending. You can also just listen to what they're talking about. When they're ready to go into class, when they're in the lunchroom talking and yapping away, when they're just in the hallway, be curious, talk to them, find out what they're talking about, find out what they're interested in, because that's going to be your first indication to have a dynamic lecture. You see, students only want to do things that are of interest to them. They don't care what's of interest to you. They're only thinking about what's in it for them. You know, that famous radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me? That's exactly how students think. So in order for you to engage students, you first need to find out what they're interested in. Now, once you know what the students are interested in, you have to take that information and utilize that and link it to what it is that you're teaching. For example, if a student is trying to win a video game and trying to get to the next level, and you have a math problem, you have to find out somehow in some way to make that math problem be the reason why they're going to win that video game. You have to link your, whatever it is you're teaching, your problem, your math problem, to help them solve their problem. What you're looking for is a burning issue. Once you find out what students are trying to solve in their lives and try to understand, because now you understand them, you are solving that burning issue for them with the content that you're giving them from the class. Now you become a resource. Now you're answering questions. You're becoming that person that's making their lives easier, making them understand the world. And they're going to thank you for that, because they're going to say, this teacher is really, really helpful. They're helping my life become a lot easier. And they're going to be all ears every time you open your mouth. Now, here's a tiny trick. Don't give them the answer right away. You have to lead them into figuring that stuff out. There's something called the heuristic approach. You see, when students discover something, it means more to them. So you kind of reveal the burning issue. You say something like, how many of you want to learn how to pass that video game? And you explain how the algorithm works. You explain how things go to different levels. However you're going to explain them. And when they say, yeah, I want to learn how to do that, then everything that you're revealing to them is going to be relevant to them. But they don't know how until the end. So you have to find some way to make sure that at the end, when you summarize and say, now this is how you pass that video game, this is how you make it to the next level. Now the students are saying, wow, this teacher over here really knows his stuff. Oh my God, this teacher over here is really helpful. These are the kind of things that gives these students a sense of, my teacher has value. in my life, and I'm going to listen to my teacher every time they open their mouth. So bring up a burning issue that's important to the students, and then link your lesson to whatever burning issue it is. These students have a lot of burning issues because you're older, they don't know how to navigate life, and they're trying to figure out life. You're helping them figure out their lives, and that's valuable to them. The second way to have an effective lecture is to be dynamic in front of these students. In order for you to be dynamic, you need to have 3 attributes. And those 3 things are energy, vigor, and motion. Let me explain what these things are. When you look up in the Oxford Dictionary, the definition of dynamic gives these 3 elements inside of it. So let's talk about energy. You want to have a level of energy that's contagious to the students. You need to really get pumped for your class. The students need to be able to feel that you really care about this lesson. If you're just going through the motions and you're doing like the old Ferris Bueller movie and just talking about certain things in a very nonchalant way, they're going to tune out right away. But if you're really excited about this topic, because this topic, you were working on it last night and you include a story about how you thought about this, they're going to get engaged. They're going to get enthusiastic because you're enthusiastic. Energy is contagious. I always use the example when somebody has a very, very loud belly laugh and they start laughing hysterically, it kind of makes you laugh. Energy works the same way. It is contagious. You need to have contagious energy. Now, some teachers might say to themselves, this is a stressful job. I'm having a lot of issues at home, and how am I going to have energy? Well, there's a little trick that I used to use when I was teaching, and I would find that one song that really gets me going, that song that gets me really pumped and energized in my car. On my way to work, I play that song over and over. I sing as loud as I can. I'm just rocking out in the car. That gets my blood flowing. That gets my energy going. That gets me prepared for my profession. That gets me prepared for going into that classroom and being that professional educator. Students are looking for that. When you're providing that level of energy, the students are going to respond accordingly. The second element of being dynamic has to do with vigor. Vigor has to do with your ability to bring students to a certain point where they think they can't go any further, and then you stop. So just like a video game, these students are engaged because they don't know what's happening next. They don't know what's going to happen. They're intensely focused on what it is they need to figure out, what it is they need to listen to, what it is their brain can handle. And it's really keeping them awake. And that's part of being dynamic. When you give them that vigor, those students are totally awake because they have to deal with this thing that you're giving them. So you're bringing them to these different levels, but then you give them a release. You don't want to push them over the edge. You want to pause and stop for them to take a breather and then start again. So I kind of call it the video game effect, and it's very, very effective. That's the second part of being dynamic. The third part is motion. You have to constantly have motion. You have to be moving. The students have to be moving. Everything has to be moving constantly. There's a study that says that every 7 seconds, something needs to happen. The reason why that's effective is because every 7 seconds, the brain begins to relax and the brain begins to go into a sedentary mode, and then students begin to drift off. If every 7 seconds something happens, it causes a synapse in the student's brain and keeps them awake. So every 7 seconds, there needs to be some kind of movement, some kind of voice inflection, some kind of turning of the page, some kind of pointing to the board, some kind of pointing to a video, some type of asking a question. Something every 7 seconds needs to happen. Whether you're doing it or whether the students are doing it, it keeps them engaged. These 3 elements are what makes you dynamic: energy, vigor, and motion. Now, the last element of giving an effective lecture and never boring your students is you have to become a good storyteller. Storytelling has been around for centuries. This is what keeps things in history alive. Every time you give a lecture, don't just give the information, give a story, give some background information. Talk about what's happening before, what's happening here. You might want to have some kind of ongoing story that's going on in your class or in the news that you're explaining. However you want to package it, storytelling is what keeps people engaged. In order to have students engaged, you have to become a good storyteller. You have to be able to take a story and pack it together with the content that you're giving them. Once you do that, it gives it significance. It gives it traction. It gives us a sense of a path that the students have to go on. When you're telling a story about something, it always gets people involved. Now, have you noticed that I haven't talked about any content that you're teaching? I haven't talked about math, social studies, history, economics. I haven't talked about any of that. These are the elements that need to be in your lecture. Whatever topic that you're teaching, whatever subject matter expert that you are, it doesn't matter. You need to start with a burning issue that has to do with the student's interest. You need to have energy, you need to have vigor, you need to have motion inside the lecture, and you always need to wrap it in a story. Once you have these three elements, your lectures will never be boring again, and you're never going to have students drift in your class. The more you utilize these techniques, the easier it's going to get, and the more it's going to become part of what you do on a daily basis. Remember, you are a professional educator. This is what they pay you to do. This is what students expect. And you have the capability of doing these things and captivating students every single day. Pick up my free guide, 20 Ways to Energize a Classroom, and start utilizing these 20 techniques inside your lecture every single class. Talk to you soon and stay dynamic.